Airport's version, the right version, you know. Yeah. My kitchen in the right spot.
Or how they dug it up, they put all straight concrete, it's doing everything.
Right, typically they would set in some sort of temporary, usually is a, typically it is a cardboard sonnet. Sonnery.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting to the Oxnard City Council Public Works and Transportation Committee to order. September 13th, 2022, it's 8:30 PM. This is a Zoom. Details for in-call public comments during a meeting. Number one, dial phone number 888-475-4499. enter meeting ID 837-2737-8195. And the passcode is 281222. I understand those numbers go extremely fast, but if you look on the internet, you can find the agenda and you can have it at hand. If you wish to speak during a public comment or a particular matter on the agenda, please sign up by following the Zoom calling and steps listed below. Once the mayor calls for public speakers, press *9 to raise your hand and inform the city clerk you would like to speak during the public speaking section for the particular item on the agenda while in the Zoom waiting room. The public may view the meeting from home on Spectrum Channel 10, Frontier Channel 35, or YouTube at youtube.com/Oxnard News. Video recordings of the meeting are typically available online following the meeting at the city's website, which is www.oxnard.org/city-meetings. And with that, Madam Clerk, can we take the roll, please?
Chair Perrello,
Here.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Here.
Member Lopez.
Here.
We have a quorum.
And Madam Clerk, was the posting of the agenda done appropriate?
Yes, the agenda for this meeting was posted on the City Hall Bulletin Board on September 6th.
And Madam Clerk D. Lai, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I have, now we are at public comments, and I have one public comment in hand, Mr. Ray Blatel, and I don't know if any have called in, but Mr. Blatel, would you like to speak at this time?
Thank you. Committee Chair, committee members, city staff, and members of the public. On August the 15th, I submitted a 3-part public records access request to the city clerk. Since this PRA was relative to the golf course, of course, the target department was Public Works. In addition to the nominal 10 days to respond, the city requested 14 additional days for a total of nearly 24 days, almost a month. The city finally responded on September the 8th. However, the city supplied response seemingly only addressed the first part of the PRA. I say seemingly because the response was way off course. The response contained the city data, which I already had. What I wanted and specifically requested in the first part of the PRA was AGC financial data. I'd like to point out that AG financials are available to the city and must be provided to the city upon request per the agreement, as I've received the same in prior fiscal years from the city. Regarding parts 2 and 3 of the PRA, these were completely ignored by the city staff without any explanation whatsoever, and then the PRA was closed. All of this while waiting for nearly 3 weeks to get the wrong information and to have some of the PRA completely ignored. I say, what's going on here? Does the city staff not read these PRAs? Is there no quality assurance to ensure all elements are addressed and that the responses are relevant to the requested information? Does the city typically close PRAs before all elements are addressed? This is not the first time this has happened to me. I let it go before, but now I must speak up. This has to stop. I responded to the city clerk that the response to this PRA was completely inadequate and that being the wrong data was provided in 2 parts of the PRA were ignored. On September 9th, I received an email from the city clerk's office stating that the PRA will be reopened. Plus, to be fair, I've been communicating with the assistant city clerk regarding this matter, and for this, I'm very appreciative. At least it appears the city is trying. Yesterday, I received 2 more files regarding this PRA. These 2 were incorrect, and I had explained to the city clerk why. Granted, I appreciate that the city has reopened the PRA. Otherwise, I would have resubmitted a request for the same data, but this time with 3 separate PRAs, hoping to get all I need. I mention all of this, hoping that in the future, Oxnard city staff will pay more attention to PRA content and hopefully get it right the first time and avoid all this delay and turmoil.
30 seconds.
And if the future, my PRAs are confusing in any manner, I invite city staff to contact me directly and for clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. I'll make a comment on this one, public comments. Are there any call-in on this? Madam,
Chaparral, there's no additional public speakers for this item.
and the city attorney, do you have anything to add in the process that we handle public requests for information? I know there are people that ask for information that is not available, not that it's hidden, it has never been manufactured. Sometimes there's requests for opinions and there's nothing in writing. Is there some, can you give a brief, and I know it's not on the agenda, but I'm taking this privilege as the chair. What exactly is a public request for information and what, because he gave the exact, to my member, the number of days that we have. But what exactly is a public request for information and what strength does it have under the law of the state of California?
We have, once a Records Act request comes in, can you hear me okay? Once
Thank
it comes in, we have 10 days to respond. After those 10 days, we can request a 14-day written extension. If we need to extend beyond that, we are authorized to do so underneath the government code. Sometimes requests that come in that require pulling documents for different aspects of the request from different departments. What we would do is then take them on a rolling basis. We would give them documents as we find them, as we procure them, as we review them and make sure they go out. So one problem that we are having is it's a technical issue with the online system. Once the first production goes out, it closes it. So we're working with IT to fix that issue. So thankfully it was reopened for our speaker here. The other thing is the city has no obligation to create documents that don't exist. So it is possible that there are documents that are just not responsive to his request. He may not be getting exactly what he wants, but he's getting what is responsive and in the city's possession.
Thank you very much. It's informative to me and I hope it's informative to the information. Mr. Blattel, thank you for bringing that to us. Moving on to the next item. The next item is a consent. City Clerk Department approval of the minutes. The recommendation of the Public Works and Transportation Committee approve the minutes for July 26th, 2022 regular meeting as presented. Do we have any concerns, questions, omissions, or wish to table this item?
None for me.
Do we have any motion to approve?
Chair, I'll move approval of the minutes for the July 26th meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. And we don't have we'll take a roll call, please.
Member Lopez,
Yes.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Chair Perrello,
Yes,
motion passes 3-0.
thank you very much. The next item is D1 reports. Public Works Department, subject agreement A-8495 with Toro Enterprises Incorporated for the water and wastewater on-call construction and repair services project, specification number PW 22-125. The recommendation that the Public Works and Transportation Committee recommend that the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to execute agreement A-8495 with Toro Enterprises Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $10,300,000 over a 5-year term ending October 17th, 2027 for the water and wastewater on-call construction and repair services project. Specification number PW 22-125. This is due to the Measure M issues. This is not available for a full tilt presentation, but it was available online and hopefully people saw that. Do we have any public speakers on this item? I have no cards, but Madam Assistant City Clerk, do we have any speakers on this item?
Chair Perrello, no, we don't.
Okay, thank you. Do the members of my committee have any questions or concerns?
Yes, I think this is a really important issue because it includes the utilities that are really important. They're healthy issue. And this for non-scheduled items and unplanned repairs and maintenance for facilities and infrastructure. It goes from time to time. So I think it's important that we allocate the funding, Mr. Chair, for this department, which is again, a health and safety issue, for the citizens of Oxnard.
I agree.
Mhm.
Do you have any questions?
Yes, Chair. I know the presentation is posted online, but if it's possible for Mr. Marcinko to give a brief summary, or Mr. Wolf. or Mr. Hauser, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate just a summary of this, of this item, given the amount. I mean, it's $10 million, so I think it would be appropriate to give a brief summary. Thank you.
Good evening, committee chair, committee members. My name is Jan Hauser. I'm the wastewater division manager. This contract is shared between water, wastewater, and recycled water. And we've had a contract like this for literally decades, right? And it's really an insurance policy in case we have any major emergencies, broken water main in the middle of a large intersection, a failure of the wastewater plant in any way, which could, cost a lot of money. So we need a contractual mechanism in place with enough money to cover those things. Now, hopefully, we don't use, even close to the amount that's being approved tonight, but it's there as an insurance policy. So essentially, since it's shared, it's $1 million a year for water, $1 million a year for wastewater.
No, thank you.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Again, as Councilmember Lopez mentioned, it's a $10 million contract. It's a big contract. And I have asked questions specifically on this. There were put out for public bids, the way it's supposed to be done. We did everything. There was one bidder that we found responsive and two that were non-responsive. On a 10 million, just from the seat of my pants, on a $10 million bid, I can't imagine people not wanting to take a shot at getting an income from a $10 million job. Is there anything you can help this council member and the public who may be watching? Why were two bidders disqualified or found to be not substantial? And the actual words are non-responsive. And the reason to ask that, there's got to be somebody at home that has a construction site going, wait a minute, $10 million contract. They're sitting at home watching dinner and their wife is giving them an elbow. Like, why didn't you bid on that contract? Do we have something we could learn from this?
So yeah, one of the proposers or the bidders was deemed to be non-responsive just because they didn't submit all the information required as part of the bid package. So they were essentially thrown out, right from the beginning. The other bidder was missing some information that wasn't deemed to be so critical that we couldn't ask for them to submit the information, which was done. We submitted an RFI, or request for information, to that company with a deadline that we needed that information by, and they did not respond by the deadline. So they were thrown out as non-responsive also.
Thank you very much. Some real basic lessons you learn in school. When they call you for dinner, dinner's on the table. When the teacher says turn in the homework, you're supposed to turn it in. And thank you very much. I hope some people are paying attention and they learn that deadlines matter. Thank you. Do we have any further questions or recommendation or?
Need a motion?
Yes,
Motion to receive.
I'll second it. I'll second it. Roll call, please.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Chair Perrello,
Yes.
Member Lopez,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. Number 2, Public Works Department. Update on drought response actions and current drought conditions. The recommendations, the Public Works and Transportation Committee receive and file the Water Conservation Update Report. Again, because of the Measure M situation, the public will not be given a presentation, but it is available online. And Madam Clerk, do we have any callers or speakers on this item?
Chair Perrello, no, we don't.
Okay, thank you very much. Do the committee members have any questions or concerns?
You're going to give us a report on what's happening, and potentially too, once you give us a report, how much rain do we get, if any at all?
Right, hang on. If you don't mind, we need you to ask questions.
Okay,
Yes.
well, isn't that a question?
Well, Madam City Attorney, how far can we push this without getting into, because we Measure M and the people behind
We
Measure
can't.
M. So we can't. So
Okay,
we can
well,
ask a lot of questions. Okay.
Okay,
Maybe let Michael give his presentation and then ask questions based on that. Oh, I'm sorry.
we can, okay. We'll listen.
Okay. Committee members, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Wolf, in this presentation, so you're providing an update on the conservation efforts. And so can you summarize what we have been able to do as a city, as residents, in the last couple of months? And then I may have a follow-up based on, I think, some information that was out there regarding how much water has been saved by other jurisdictions and where Oxnard stands amongst those.
Good evening, committee members. Michael Wolf, Director of Public Works. So the first part of the question is about what is Oxnard specific in terms of conservation, and part of that information is in the staff report, but I'll try to talk to that chart. So there's a table or a chart on page 65 of the overall agenda item, and it talks about where we are with respect to a 2020 usage. So the good news is that we are trending down in our 2022 usage below our 2020 usage. And I'll put this in a little bit of perspective. The governor has requested a 20% reduction over the under the 2020 usage. In the past, actually, that request has been compared to 2013 usages, but right now they're asking for that comparison to 2020. So we are under our total usage as customers from a 2020. And the percentage is very small compared to our 2020 usage, but part of that discussion is really, is our 2020 usage a true measurement of what we typically do in any one year? So we had COVID, and we have lots of factors that play into our usage, weather being a big factor. What was the weather back in 2020? The good news is that we're actually in our heavier user months, June, July, August. If you look at our usage by month, those are typically our 3 largest months that we use water. So the good news is that we're underneath our 2020 average, just based on even our highest usage month. So from a perspective, we're below our typical usage, or not typical, we're below our 2020 usage. But that's not that's part of the story, because as we talked about before, the real request right now is not necessarily our total usage. The real request for water conservation is a very specific request, which is what we consider our imported water, or our Cayugas, and we call it Met water. So that's actually the request right now. And we're well below the specific volume that they've assigned to Oxnard. And we talked about before, because we actually have potentially other places where we can get water from. We have 3 sources of water available to us, Cayugas or Met being one of them. We call that the imported water. And then we have groundwater from the ones that we pump, and groundwater from United. So those are like 3 dials. And what I spoke about before is when that emergency ordinance came out in May, we were able to dial down on the Met water and dial up on the other dials that we have. So with that, we're able to stay underneath that, what would be a assigned volume. It's not really our allocation, it's an assigned volume to the city of Oxnard, because we wanted to make sure we were underneath that number, because they were talking about very high penalties, $200,000 or $2,000 per acre foot. We're talking about potentially millions of dollars of penalties. And so we were able to make those changes operationally to address that. So holistically, we're underneath a 2020 average, and we're actually well under our 2013 usage. But if you look at it very specifically, we are significantly under our Cayugas allocation.
You mentioned we were able to decrease the amount of the purchased water and increase the amount of the other 2 sources. So there are no penalties for doing that?
Correct. So, but we have some restrictions, and that's correct. There's no penalties from Met or Cayugas, but recognize that those other sources have some limitations to them. So groundwater, we have an actual allocation in any one pumping year, and we can't exceed that unless we want to pay penalties. So there's kind of penalties everywhere, if you will. So if we exceed our pumping allocation, then there potentially are penalties for that. So that's not an unlimited source. So we have to be careful when we change that dial a little bit to not go past that. And that water year ends at the end of this month. End of September, so end of this month, yeah. But there would be penalties if we go over that. The other source of water is United. There's a longer conversation about the allocation that they have, but none of these sources are unlimited. They each have their own restrictions and potentially penalties to them. It's just when the emergency kicked in, Cayugas through Met or Met through Cayugas said that if you exceed this volume, there's a potential for penalties. And they did it as holistically as they could. So they actually are looking at it at a metropolitan water district level, not necessarily each individual agency. So they're not looking actually at Oxnard or Camarillo or Thousand Oaks. They're actually looking at it at a state water dependent holistic look. And so I think one of the charts talked about, and I've showed the graph before, where we see that the good news is that Met as a whole is meeting their target, but different individual agencies like Cayugas is not, but collectively as a whole, Met is.
I can ask after.
There actually was another question, if you don't mind, there was a second part of the question I don't think I got to, and I just wanted to touch it a little bit, because you had to ask kind of what we were doing as a city, I think, so setting aside the customers, but looking at the city as its own customer, so parks and landscaping and medians. One of the things we were able to do, the water resources team, and thank you to Megan, was able to get funding to do water audits for our parks. And we did about 23 parks this last go around. We were able to get a third party come in, paid for by Met, be able to look at our irrigation system and be able to provide us basically a roadmap to save water going forward. If you do these tweaks, if you make these repairs, you can save some water. So that actually was a really good resource that the water resources team got for us. So we're making sure that we address those repairs and do those changes so that we can save water from that perspective. The other thing that we're doing, as you know, across the board, we are 1 day a week irrigation. Now that's the default position. There are several caveats to that. Non-functional turf is actually 0 days, but we are taking advantage of some of the exceptions that the state provides for our playing surfaces. So if you look at our parks across the board, most of them are, if they're not a playing surface, if they're not programmed or otherwise used for some sort of athletic youth program, then they're at 1 day a week. If there's non-functional turf, it's actually 0 days a week. But places that are athletic fields, we are able to use the state exception and take it up to 2 days a week, or sometimes 3 days a week, depending on how heavy the usage is, maybe where the landscaping started when we had the drought. And so we are making sure, as our own user of water, as our own customer, internal customer, that we are taking full advantage of the exceptions, but also dialing back where we need to be a good customer of our own. The last piece of that is the trees. And so one of the things, this is now my third, I think I mentioned this before, my third drought cycle since I've been doing this. About 7 years ago, and then about 14 years ago. So those two previous drought cycles, we saw a lot of post-drought, we saw a lot of decline in the trees. And so I think the state recognized that over the last two drought cycles. And in this current one, they've made a focus about pointing out that trees are important, that we should be looking at them a little differently. So we are taking advantage of the exceptions that are allowed in the current guidelines to irrigate our trees a little differently than maybe our turf is. And so in places where we're able to use our existing irrigation system, we may be capping off places that aren't irrigating trees, but allowing us to irrigate trees a little more frequently than 1 day a week. So again, we're taking that direction from the state and making sure that we don't, as best as we can, we don't see a decline in our trees. So those are some of the things that we're doing to save water and save our landscaping as best as possible in this process.
How long with the landscape, especially the parks, how long can they have the watering schedule, the current, 1 a day or none at all, before it becomes an additional cost for the city to repair it in the future? Where are we at with that?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a great answer to that, because it all kind of depends on where it started, right? Meaning, what did the turf look like before we started to dial back on the irrigation? Because some places may have had a advantage, if you will, because they had a highly functioning irrigation system for multiple years. Some places may not have had a highly functioning irrigation system several years ago because of deferred maintenance. And so part of it's dependent upon where it started. Part of it's depending upon the type of soil that's there. This is something that grows. And so it really depends on the nutrients in the soil. How much sun does it get? How much sun exposure? How much shade? So all those play into that factor. Your question is, to me, is a little bit of a guess. I will say of the different types of, and it also depends on the types of grass. So like kikuya, which is a type of grass, is basically a weed, and it's very difficult to kill that. You can usually bring that back by just turning the water back on. But other places that are more, warm weather grasses or cool weather grasses, there may be a need to overseed if it becomes to a point where there's nothing still germinating below the ground. And so a lot of that is dependent upon all those factors. The good news is that we're going into the months that we typically dial back anyway, meaning June, July, August is our highest user months because of the hotter weather. The good news for Oxnard is we don't see a lot of hot weather, although last week or two has been unique here in Oxnard. But we're going into the months October, November, December, January, February that typically we cut back anyway on our water. So I think that we can take advantage of that and potentially sort of mitigate any future loss, especially in the places where we have playing fields, because we're allowed to take some more exceptions to that.
Thank you.
So Michael, looking at the outreach and education program, that's working pretty good now with the, I see the electronic message signs on Ventura Road and other signs, and also the orange lawn signs, I think are working out pretty good. What people can read that. Like over by my neighborhood, I can see where they're really outstanding. So that outreach and education, I think, is really important. That's really helped us tremendously, I'm sure. Can you share a little bit more on
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to share on that. Thank you, Mayor, for pointing that out. We do have a really great water resources team, and they've taken it to the next level, in my opinion, on some of the ways that they're doing the outreach. And I have some stats in front of me, just looking at some of the August numbers. Our web page views. So we're 4,500 web page views in the month of August. So quite a bit of people looking at that, getting information. There's a lot of great information available on our website, not only of what's happening, but what they can do. How can they help save? How can they help potentially get rebates, those kinds of things. And the next one is that the turf rebate allocation or applications are 6 for the month of August. We also have a total of 340 water waste reports for the month of August. So again, a lot of people are taking this very seriously and helping us out where we can't have eyeballs everywhere throughout the city, and helping us identify some places that we can go focus our attention, put some resources there, and help some folks out understanding where we're at in the drought.
So Michael, you're doing a pretty good job, I think, in residential. How about the commercial outreach? I've seen a lot of the commercial businesses watering their lawn here in the middle of the night or in the morning and so forth. So how do we reach those commercial folks?
And that's something we're going to have to focus in on. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, that's probably a place that it's easy to drive around the city and see that there's those places that aren't either paying attention or otherwise ignoring what's being said. And so that's one of the places I know that the Water Resources team is going to be focusing in on their future, trying to get that message out to those groups. The commercial, industrial, and institutional ones were supposed to be actually 0 days watering. So the state actually mandated the non-functional turf in those areas to be 0 days. So that's a focus for our Water Resources group going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And before we get done with this item, you have members of your staff here. Before you hang up, just introduce them. The question that I have with respect to the parks, I recently attended a neighborhood council meeting in Cabrillo neighborhood, and there were several soccer games going on at the same time. One of the city staff was there, and they were asked, they were grilled, what can they do with respect to the soccer tearing up the parks? And the question came up that the soccer is played with cleats. Is there any action on the tenderness of our parks with the grass and the condition that they're in, working with Parks and Rec, and that they have soccer games without cleats. If there still wants to be soccer, because I know that just like a baseball field or a football field, certain parts of the field get torn up and they don't come back and it has to be replanted, then the whole field is off-site. Do you have any information you could share with us on that?
I do not, but I certainly can talk to our recreation staff about that. That's who would potentially have that input to the soccer leagues.
Okay.
But I would say though, over the last several weeks, we have again taken full advantage of some of those exceptions in the playing fields and have addressed and increased the watering in some of those play areas because of that exceptions allowed, to make sure that we do as best as we can to avoid that future loss.
Okay. With respect to the expectations with the National Weather Service and the information you get, and I know you have water department people here, what is the outlook for the next year? I'm looking at the newspaper and it doesn't sound good. Do you have any new information?
I do not have anything new that was not in the newspaper. I would say that some of those are guesses at best. So I would say I would temper any of those expectations with very low. So right now, I don't know of anything new that's not already been out and about in terms of the news.
Okay. And overall, just my opinion, overall, there is a serious issue with respect to saving the water now, but there's a serious issue. If you don't shave it now, there may not be water available next year. And that's Mother Nature. And none of us have a direct pipeline to Mother Nature.
Yeah, I think part of that, just if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'd like to expound a little bit on that. About, if you recall, last time we were talking about this, the path that we were going down potentially led to 0 days a week watering, and then potentially a volumetric approach at the end of the year. The good news is that Met as a whole is able to hit their target. So last month, they delayed the potential for 0 days a week, and they're still sticking with the 1 day a week. That will be reassessed monthly. But the good news is that method, or the message is getting out to the state water dependent areas to conserve water to the point that they are meeting the volumetric as a whole. So that's actually good news, just from the cliff that we potentially were going down of 0 days a week, potentially as early as September, I think it was, or maybe it was October. That's been delayed. Again, that may come back to us if there's a big change, but I think it's that outcome is a little bit better than what we thought was going to happen in May.
And this city attorney, if I'm getting offline here, bring me back in. The issue with our great program, is there any new update on how the state is acting, potentially getting that into drinking water?
I would say there's nothing new other than the fact that we know other places throughout the state have had and do have permitted indirect potable reuse, so which is IPR. So, we're Joe Marcinko, our Assistant Public Works Director, is working with those agencies with the state to make sure that we're walking through that process. So when the ASR well is fully constructed and up and operational, we have the most expedient timeline to get that to an indirect potable reuse process. And so the good news is there are other places that already have it throughout the state. This is a permitting process that requires some specificity to the location that we're at, because you're talking about how much time is it being, how much contact time, when is the removal of bacteria. So all those things are specific to the situation that you're at. It's not the same if you do it in Orange County or, another place that has an aquifer. It's specific to this area. But the good news is there's other places that are permitted with the indirect potable reuse. And I would say that that's one of the places that I think when we're talking about new water, right? Because we have those three dials, right? We have the United groundwater, our groundwater, and state water. But one of those dials that we can add, a fourth dial, is new water. And so we have that with the investment that this council, this committee, and prior councils and committees have done. The investment in the GREAT program is actually going to put us in a really good position in the future where we can, what we call new water, bringing in new water to the basin, whether it's through an indirect potable reuse where we're injecting in the ground, where it's recycling the water and using it for irrigation. All kinds of opportunities of that new water is really the place that agencies want to get to. And I think Oxnard is in advance of a lot of agencies because we already have a functioning AWPF kind of facility, and other agencies are still talking and planning and designing those things.
I'd just like to say one thing. Sitting on various boards with other cities are looking very enviously at everything Oxnard has. It's ours, we're paying for it, and it's ours to do with what we want. So the takeaway I can have from your last comments, the general public can feel comfortable that the city of Oxnard is not asleep at the switch in trying to take care of everything that we can to make sure that we get all the water that we can. When the state gives us the green light, we can do it.
Yeah, and even so, and I even go a little further, that we are working with those agencies, Cayugas, and even at the Met level as best that we can to talk about water resiliency going forward. That's new water that is even different than our recycled water. So we know the drought cycle is going to be there, right? And it may change. It may be a lot more dry years and a lot more wet years. And so what do we do in those very wet years? How do we collect and otherwise store that water instead of it going out to the ocean? So those are conversations that we want to have and continue to have with Met and Cayugas about infrastructure. One of the things that Met recently did was pass a resolution about having providing access to water across their entire equitable access to the water across their entire service area. And so that's going to result, it looks like, in a conversation at a very granular level about projects and whether or not we are able as Oxnard or Cayugas as a member agency to Met take advantage of that and be able to fund some of the projects that make Ventura County more resilient, not only Oxnard, but Ventura County as a whole. And so is that investing into our ASR process or our GRAPE program? Is that providing an opportunity to take advantage of those wet years and put some of that in the ground, or other places do these where the wet years, where there's water going out to the ocean, can we capture that somehow? Can we store that in the ground for later use? So those are the opportunities going forward that I think we as Oxnard and working with our member agencies here are in a good position to do.
Thank you. Just like to use the word that you used, take advantage. The city of Oxnard is working, I serve on various water things for the city of Oxnard. The city of Oxnard is working with all the other partners collectively to do the best for everybody, but not to allow somebody to take advantage of somebody else. And I feel comfortable about that, representing the city. And I hope that the residents do also.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll take you up on your offer and introduce the staff that's sitting behind me who does all the work. I just stand up and talk. So Megan Schneider's our water resources in our water resources division. She wants to stand up and wave. And then Abraham Maldonado is behind her. He's also in our water resources. Omar Castro, is our water manager, and then Joe Marcinko, our assistant public works director. So those are the team that's really doing the hard work and feeding me the information. So
Thank you very much, because the public, sometimes when they look in the audience, they go, who the heck are those guys with a suit and tie? And nobody ever knows who they are. Thank you for introducing them. Thank you to the staff. There's almost 250,000 people here counting on the work you're doing and trusting everything you're doing. Appreciate it. You got a lot of pressure on you. Thank you. Do we have any further questions on this item? If not, I'll take a motion. It's a receive and file, but I'll take a motion to.
Chair, I'll move to receive and file this presentation, and thank you also to the staff.
I'll second. Roll call, please. Thank you, Mr. Wolf.
thank you.
Member Lopez,
Yes.
Chair Perrello,
Yes.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you. The next item is items on future agendas. Mayor, do you have any item for the future agenda?
No, I don't, but I just wanted to thank Michael for the good work and your staff, for this excellent presentation. Thank you so much. But no, I don't, sir.
Okay.
Mhm.
If I can share something,
Yes.
can we put that slide up with this? Since we're talking about drought and the good work that our water resources team does.
Doing an excellent job, yeah. Mhm.
I just wanted to promote an event that's happening this Saturday. It's a caring for your landscape in the drought. This information's been put on our outlet pages, social media, but I wanted to give an opportunity point out it's this Saturday, 10 to 11 at the Oxnard Performing Arts Center. The information is available on our website. And if you want to register, please use the information available there, oxnardwater.org, or by calling our conservation hotline, 805-385-3905.
You want to give those numbers again? And these public service messages are great. Is it a free or a charge event?
It's a free event, open to all Oxnard residents. So information can be found on oxnardwater.org or calling our conservation hotline at 805-385-3905.
Thank you very much. For myself on items and future agendas. As was mentioned tonight, the water year starts on the 1st of October. And although we've had some extremely dry and hot weather here, other parts of the nation have had a tremendous amount of flooding. I think it's time that not just for the Public Works Department, but for the entire city of Oxnard to be brought up to speed with what's going on in the activities for the SCR3 and the SCR1 levies, where they stand. I know that the wagon wheel development is building something, but I think that every member of the council needs to know. I'm one representative that represents one of that areas, but the other council member that represents the River Park area is not here. So I think it'd be best if produced in front of the entire council. The second is something that's come up today in the news. There's apparently major indications of the algae blooms in the Pacific Ocean coming up and working its way to the coast. And they're concerned about it coming to the Southland. I want to make sure that we're still monitoring the Channel Islands Harbor, that if there's going to be a potential for a fish kill, we're aware of it. I know that there's plans in place what to deal with it, but forewarned is forearmed. Then two other that are probably unpleasant. I continually go by the Southwest Community Park, and I went by tonight. There are Pop Warner type football teams playing. There are soccer teams. There are parents. There are grandparents. There's little wagons being pushed around selling food, and there's not one single bathroom. But there are two bathrooms in the Boys and Girls Club, but they continually have a chain with $50 lock on the door. They can't use those bathrooms. I believe that's got to be addressed. And along with that is the more distasteful. I don't like social media, but people send me clips off social media, and so I see them. Apparently, there are some concerns from the south part of Oxnard that the north part of Oxnard is getting to experience people going to the bathroom directly on the street in broad daylight. And so there are comments. I live in the north of Oxnard. There are comments with respect to, well, now the north end finally gets to find out what the south end's been living with for a long time. I believe there will come a time when we have to have public restrooms. Whether you're homeless or not homeless, when you got to go, you got to go. You got a choice. You can try and find some place to go, or you go in your pants. Neither one is acceptable. But most times in past, there were public restrooms. Because of the situation with homelessness, vandalism, businesses do not allow the use of restrooms unless you're a customer. I believe this has to be addressed, and I think the entire council is going to have to face on that. And those are the concerns that I think for future agenda items. Some may be in Public Works, but I think the bigger bites are for the entire council. We can't walk away from this. Thank you. Any closing comments? City manager like to say anything? Nope. Thank you very much. This meeting, would you like to say anything? No. This meeting is adjourned.